And when we start working with things like the discriminant, basically, sometimes you're going to find quadratics, things with x squared, that you can't factor using the diamond or some other means. So do we get to just throw those out and say I can't do anything with them?
Yeah.
No, we don't. Nice try on that, but no. We've got to have an alternate plan. So there's this alternate plan we use called the quadratic formula that lets us come up with answers, and we can even do it if we don't like doing the diamond and want to find answers that would work for that too. But there's a piece of that quadratic formula that I am going to just kind of work with to try and get a feel for things. And that piece is this guy right here, and it's called the discriminant, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move down a little bit on the sheet, talk a little bit about the discriminant, and then we're going to come back up to talk about the quadratic formula a little bit. So let me move down here a bit. All right, so down here on the bottom. So the discriminant is just a little tiny formula, like I'd mentioned up above. It's just this b squared minus 4ac part, but it's part of something much bigger, okay, the quadratic formula. So here's what it can do for us. It lets us know how many answers there's going to be to something. Sometimes we may get one that has one answer. Sometimes it may have two, like the ones we just got done with. Sometimes it may have no answer. It may just not be factorable at all. So if we're trying to find the discriminant, my a, b, and c values are always going to go in the order of what we're doing. So what I'm going to do...
Artie, wait, so if there's like more than one problem, is that going to make the problem longer?
No, because you're going to be doing one thing or the other on these. We're either going to be finding the discriminant or we're going to be doing the quadratic formula. So I'll tell you specifically what part we're doing. It's not going to make them any longer. So here, my a value would be 3, my b value would be 2, my c value would be negative 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take them and I'm going to plug them into this. But I always want to use parentheses on the b part. And I'll explain that more when we get to one that has a negative. So b squared minus 4 times a times c. Now again, there is absolutely no problem with me plugging this into the calculator. Now, if you're comfortable doing it off the top of your head, that's okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are we ever going to use this like outside of it?
So, that's a nice way to say no. It is. So whether I do this manually or I just go ahead and plug it into the calculator, make sure I type everything in right. No better way to mess this up than to type it in wrong. Okay. So I get to an answer. You're like, okay, so what? Here's what that answer is going to tell me. And this will apply when we get into the quadratic formula here momentarily. 40, last I checked, is a positive number. If there's a positive number, that tells me if I were to plug this into the quadratic formula, I'm going to get 2 answers. So basically, all I'm trying to do when I'm working through these is what I'm doing with that. So, as you're doing these, if you're asked to just find the discriminant, all you're going to do is take those 3 values, and again, they're always going to be in order for you. So again, here, my a would be 3, my b would be negative 7, my c would be negative 8, and I'm going to plug them into the little mini formula, and that's it. But again, I want to make sure I use parentheses when I'm doing this. And here's the reason that it's important to use parentheses, whether or not you're doing this manually, just on your own, or whether you're using a calculator.
So the b would always be in front.
Yep, the b is always going to be the first thing that we're doing with these. And let me show you the difference here. First, I'll do parentheses. I'll do this correctly. I would, and I'm going to show you why here in just a minute, why it can become a problem if I don't bother doing it. Okay, so here's my way of doing it. I'm going to get the correct answer for this one. Now let me do it if I just decide I'm not going to do parentheses. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. Negative 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and type that in. Ooh, wait a minute. I just got a different answer. Well, why is that? The difference is by not putting my negative 7 into parentheses, okay, if I do negative 7 in parentheses, I get negative 7 times negative 7. We know negative times negative is positive. But if I do it without the parentheses, the calculator does 7 to the second power, which is 49, then puts the negative on it. Well, that's a big difference. That's like having 49 bucks or owing somebody 49 bucks. And that makes a huge difference in our answer.
So why don't you just do it in the first place then?
What's that?
Why don't you do it in the first place then? Why don't you use the parentheses?
Well, because if I don't use the parentheses, then I end up with the wrong answer. Because I want to do negative 7 times negative 7, because I'm trying to square what b is. I'm trying to take b to the second power. So this one, there's going to be 2 solutions, but our bigger lesson to be learned out of this is make sure whenever you're substituting a value in that you're using parentheses. Because that way you won't run into that dilemma. You won't run into that, well, you know, is that going to work or is it not going to work? I'm not sure. So that's my easiest way to be sure that that's going to be the way, you know, I do things. Right here? Okay, because this is the formula. B squared, yeah, it's always going to be that. So it'll always be minus 4 times something. That'll never change. And again, just take them right in the order you see them. And then just plug them in. So b squared minus 4ac. And again, you can straight to the calculator if you want to. What's that? Okay. Or if you did things manually, which you could. Dang, I have to choose every single one. Ends up being 2 solutions every time. Because that's the one thing I do want you to be aware of. Again, if I get a positive answer, and we happen to get positives for all 3 of these, that lets me know there's going to be 2 answers. So when I get doing the quadratic formula, that would be the case. If I get 0 as an answer, there's 1 solution. If I get a negative number, so like if this had been negative 172, then I have no solutions. So here's where today is going to be kind of weird. When we get done with this, because we're going to come back up to the top and see how this works with the quadratic formula for a minute. But the back of this sheet, okay, is going to be our homework for discriminants. Okay. So all we're going to do back here is use the b squared minus 4ac and figure out how many solutions there are. Okay, that's going to be your whole thing going on the back here. But I want to introduce you to the quadratic formula today. Okay, yep, just all of them back here because it'll go really quick. Okay, and then we're going to kind of blend today and tomorrow together. So we're not going to have a lot of new notes tomorrow. So we're going to kind of put it in today so we can kind of work at it and I can be able to answer questions. So for right now though, and I know you want to jump right in and get this done, flip back to the front for a second. What we're going to do here momentarily, should I even be smarter and switch papers? Yes, I should. Okay, I'm going to switch papers for a moment. You're like, oh boy. I'm going to switch over here just for a second because I want to make sure I introduce this in its own way. Okay. We just got done talking about with the discriminant, this little part right here. Okay. Now we're going to add a little bit to it, and it's called the quadratic formula. And here's how this works. If I can't factor something, okay, using the diamond or some other form, if I use this formula, I'll get the same answers every time. Okay. So it'll find the x-intercepts for me. So, just like it was with the discriminant, I'm still going to get my a value from whatever's in front of x squared. And if I don't see a number, I'll just use a 1. Whatever number's in front of x will be my b. Whatever value's in front at the end is going to be my c. Okay? They'll stick an equal 0 at the end. We're not going to worry about that. And we're going to plug all the numbers into the formula. Now, this is just my suggestion. Okay? There's not really a good way to plug this into the calculator all at once. Okay? There's bound to have something happen with a button press that's going to mess you up on things. So even though you see me doing it here and plugging all the numbers in, and again I'm using parentheses everywhere, that's going to take a lot of work and kind of mess things up. So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to kind of write this over to the side here too. We're going to do the part under the square root. Okay, we're going to do the b squared minus 4ac under the square root. We're going to do that first. Then we're going to rewrite the fraction and solve it. And I'll show you how we're going to do that right now. Okay, it's good to have the example here, but just in case, okay, I want you to see how this is going to go, because we're going to get 2 answers most of the time on these. So I'm just going to move this up a little. I'll make sure that stays on the screen. Okay. So here's my first job on every one of these. What's my A, B, and C in number 1 down here? My A is 1. What's my B going to be? 4. And my C is negative 5. Okay, that's always what I want to do first. Make sure I've got those values written down so I don't get them mixed up.
Are you looking at the one underneath where you wrote that?
Yeah, I'm looking. Yep, I'm looking down here right now because I want to do the one where we can actually do this and see how this goes. So I get that, and I look up at the top, and I'm like, okay, so that whole formula is there, but I'm not doing the whole formula right now. Okay, here's the entire formula. Even though you've got it up at the top, I want to make sure we've got access to it down here. The only part I'm doing for step 1 is right here. Okay, I'll even mark what steps I'm doing here. So I'm going to do the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Now here's how I would personally do it. And again, you have a choice. I mean, again, everybody does things their own way. Some of you are going to wonder why I do this, and you're saying that takes extra time, but I'll explain why. Myself, you're like, Hardy, you're forgetting to put the square root in. I think I know what I'm doing here, though. I'll do it both ways, then you tell me which way you think is the, better way to go at the end. So I just typed in my b squared minus 4ac like I did with the discriminant. Okay, I get my answer. Now I need to take the square root of that, though. So I'd hit second and x squared to get my square root up, and then just type in the answer I got. You're like, well, why don't you just type in the square root to begin with? Why don't you just do, this? Well, notice that parentheses there, and I'm afraid that's going to mess some of you up. Yes, because if I don't, I'm not going to get the right answer. If I just typed in 4 and then closed the parentheses and hit squared, I'm not going to get the right answer. If you're going to do it right away, you'd actually have to do it like this. And I think that's actually going to cause you more trouble than help. Because I know I tend to forget that sometimes. Because then I even got to put another one on at the end to make the answer come out right. Because if I forget it, and I just do this, and I'm just working my way along, and I'm remembering my parentheses. I mean, I'm doing everything else right. Oops. And I may not know that that's the wrong answer when I plug it in. I wouldn't know that off the top of my head that 24 was wrong. But what the calculator's doing here is it's just taking the square root of 4 squared and then subtracting the rest of this. And that's not what I want. I want the 6. So I've got to make sure, that's why I say I would type this part in first and then just take the square root of my answer. Yep, if you're going to try to do it all at once, you got to have an extra parenthesis at the beginning and an extra one at the end.
So at the end of 6.
So now that I have this, okay, I have this part done. So part 2, this says negative b. So negative b, and now I'm just going to copy this, plus or minus. I just figured out what this part is. This square root of b squared minus 4ac is 6. So I'm going to write that down over 2 times a, over 2 times 1. That's a lot easier to work with than trying to deal with the whole big thing at once. So you're like, okay, this seems kind of odd though. So negative times 4. Okay, so negative 4 plus or minus 6 over 2. Well, can I just leave it that way? Well, no, we actually want to know what the answers are. So here's how this is going to work to finish. I'm going to split this up into 2 little mini fractions. Because that plus minus, so I'd have negative 4 plus 6 over 2. But I'm also going to have negative 4 minus 6 over 2. And I have to do both of those. And you're like, why are you putting parentheses around the negative 4 plus 6? Well, again, if you go to the calculator, it's going to be an issue if you don't, because the calculator will divide 6 and 2 first order. We don't want that. So I can do that, or if I can do it in my head, that's probably even better. Negative 4 plus 6 is 2. But again, if you are more comfortable letting the calculator do your dirty work, that's okay. Just make sure that if you do let the calculator help you, that you put your top of your fraction, okay, in parentheses. As long as you do that, you're all good. And then down here, if I did it, negative 4 minus 6 would be negative 10. Divided by 2 would be negative 5. And those are my 2 answers. I get my 2 solutions that way. And the cool thing about the quadratic formula is it works for everything. So it's not like, well, it has to be this situation or that situation. It's your do-it-all tool. So let's see here. Let's flip over, because I'll tell you how we're going to end up doing this. All right. So let's do one more together, because we're going to do this one kind of like we did the other one. The back's going to end up being the homework, but you're only going to have like 5 problems to do. So we're not going to go crazy here. All right, so on the back, my A is 3, my B is negative 10, and my C is 3. And again, let's just do it in 2 steps. Keep it simple and be done. So my first step is to do the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And again, I don't have to write that every time. I just want you to be able to see what we're up to. But do use parentheses. So negative 10 squared minus 4 times a times c. And again, just me. I would, in this case, I would not be doing the square root right away. I'd be like, all right, whatever's underneath, I'm going to get that done first. So negative 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times 3. Make sure I got it typed in good. And then I'll take the square root of the answer I get. Because that way I'm not going to have the parenthesis issues that I would otherwise. Okay, so that equaled 8. All right, let me move this over. Now I'm ready to do the rest. And again, here's my big old formula. Okay, this is the whole quadratic formula, but remember, I did this part back in step 1. So now I just say, okay, negative b, so the opposite of negative 10. You can just flip the sign on it too if you wanted to. Plus or minus. I already did the square root of b squared minus 4ac. It's 8. So I'm just going to put that in there. over 2 times, and my a is 3. Now I have to simplify this, but again, it's a lot easier by having gotten that first step out of the way. The opposite of 10, negative 10 is 10, excuse me. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So all I did was simplify this negative and multiply the numbers together. And now I'm going to split it. Because when I'm doing the quadratic formula, I'm always going to have a split. On the top, I'm going to use the plus, so 10 plus 8 divided by 6. And on the bottom, I've got 10 minus 8 divided by 6. And you can get decimals for answers, and that's okay. So 10 plus 8 is 18. Divided by 6 is 3. 10 minus 8 is 2. 2 over 6 is either 0.33, or if you hit math enter, you'll see it's 1/3. Not that bad of a thing to just kind of play with. So let me try to make sure we got everything on the right track here. Okay. The rest of this back page is the assignment for today with the quadratic formula. Okay? So numbers 3 through 7, finishing up the back of this note sheet, is going to be the assignment today as far as this part goes. So we got 5 problems here, and then back on the discriminant page on the back, that's the homework on discriminants. And you're like, well, what about that other page that says what's a metaphor at the top? That's what we're going to work on tomorrow to kind of get some more review of this and make sure we've got this. 'Cause I'm going to do a mini quiz somewhat quick this week on this. Just try and get some of you a few extra little points and a little extra boost here again as we start heading towards getting ready for the final. Okay? So try to knock these out. If you get done today, great. If not, we'll get some answers up tomorrow. Make sure that you're going okay with those. But do it in parts and take the time you got. You got about 20 minutes to play with here. Should be able to knock out at least one of these, if not both.